Hello and welcome along to the latest Liverpool Echo Blood Red podcast. The World Cup is over and Liverpool are very nearly back in action once again. Joining me today to preview the return of the proper stuff and have a little bit of a chat around the break that Liverpool enjoyed are Paul Gorst and David Lynch. Richard Garnett potentially joining us a little bit later on in the show as well, but we'll see how we go. We are recording this live, so as ever, if you've got any questions or comments, do stick them into the comment section. We'll try and come to a few of those as we go along. But Gorsty, we'll start with the World Cup final. Obviously, Ibrahima Konate was involved from a Liverpool perspective for a short time in extra time. Not the result that he would have wanted, but I have to say it was nice to see Lionel Messi get his hands on that trophy. What did you make of the final? It was a pretty good game, wasn't it?
For 80 minutes, it was a bit like France had really suffered, this virus that has been going around the camp. I thought they were just totally off it, weren't they? I thought the likes of Jules Koundé and Dembele in particular were just so far off the pace it was untrue. And after about an hour, you're looking at it thinking, well, this is just going to be a bit of a procession for Argentina. They're probably going to score a third. And then, in the coming days and weeks, we'll probably hear a little bit more about how kind of sapped France are from this virus, because they were just so far adrift of what they had been throughout most of the tournament. And then Kolo Muani, who was probably France's best player on the day, wasn't he? Obviously off the bench. He wins the penalty, and Mbappe sticks it away, and then before you know it, it's 2-2 and it's all to play for again. And that extra time was incredible, wasn't it? You talk of Konate there. I thought that ball he played through right at the end was unbelievable, outside of the foot, over the top, put him clean through, and Martinez makes a brilliant save. Argentina go up the other end, Martinez fluffs his lines, and then eventually Argentina winning on penalties. And I think, for your kind of your romantics, I think seeing Lionel Messi walk away as a world champion is probably the story that everyone wanted to see, didn't he? But it was a bit of a final for the ages, wasn't it? But for 80 minutes, it didn't look like that at all. But that's kind of been a little bit how this World Cup's gone and how some of the games have gone. I think about Argentina against Netherlands, that Argentina were cruising through in that one, weren't they, until Wout Weghorst, bags a brace with 10, 15 minutes to go, and it all changes again. So, yeah, it was an incredible final. It was a memorable World Cup in flashes, particularly the final group stage round of fixtures. But I think from a Liverpool perspective, we're all glad it's done and dusted now, and we can turn our heads towards Manchester City at the Etihad on Thursday night. Of all the teams to draw in the Cup, first game back, it is City, and then the Premier League picks up on Boxing Day, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We'll come on to that very shortly. Just before we move on from the World Cup final, Lynchy, just in terms of Konate, I wrote this actually for our Liverpool.com newsletter today. It kind of feels like for him, there'll be many more chances. You look at the spine that France will have moving forwards. Him at the back, Aurelien Tchouameni, Kylian Mbappe. They're probably going to get to more finals. He will certainly hope to get to more finals with Liverpool. It kind of feels like the start of something for him. It's the second major final he's played and lost this year. But let's maybe focus more on the fact that he got to those finals, and we'll get to more of them in future too.
Yeah, absolutely. He will fancy his chances of getting back there one day, and he should do. There's a limited pool of countries that end up playing World Cup finals anyway, and France is definitely one of them. And you look at the strength in depth you've got. They're going to be challenges going forward, and they've got so many great young players going through. And I think also you've seen sort of with Jurgen Klopp at Liverpool, you can say sometimes, okay, losing finals can become a bit of a habit, but then he completely broke that cycle, didn't he? And then, at one point, lost his first 3 finals at the club, and then with a similar group of players went on to win a load of finals. So it's, you don't worry about anything like that. One thing I would say from Konate's perspective is, he might think from a personal point of view that he was sort of very unlucky not to start that game, and I think I completely disagree as well. I've seen a lot of people say that Upamecano justified his inclusion with those sort of couple of late blocks from Martinez shots. I totally disagree with that. I thought Upamecano was all over the place, as he has been for parts of this tournament. In fact, think back to his performance against England, misses the semi-final. Konate was absolutely colossal in that game, incredible, as he had been throughout the entire tournament. And I thought Upamecano there I can't see how people are saying that a central defender who was so integral in the concession of 2 goals, had a good game because he made a couple of blocks late on. I thought I thought his fingerprints were all over the second Argentina goal in terms of giving the ball away and then leaving a humongous gap behind him. And then the third Argentina goal, he gets out to Martinez, but doesn't get anywhere near him. So the layoff comes, and then this huge gap in behind him, and that's where the shot comes from. And I just think Deschamps, he spoke about sort of having some regrets, and the regrets he spoke about was the way that France played in the first half. But I think, given a bit more time and upon deeper inspection, he'll wish that he started Ibrahima Konate in that game, because France were, I thought, poor defensively and conceded 3 goals. In a totally different way to Argentina's 3 goals they conceded. I think they were sort of unlucky to concede 3. France weren't. I didn't think Upamecano was up to it, and I think Konate is arguably the superior centre half and should feel like he should have started that game. And let me mention as well, he nearly sets up the winner right at the death and won the corner from which France get the third goal, the penalty for the third goal. So he couldn't have done more really to sort of bolster his case for starting that game, and Deschamps should regret that, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure in the Euros in a couple of years' time and in future World Cups, you'd think that he would be a nailed-on starter, and that kind of ties into what I was saying before, really, about it being the start, really, for him and so much more to come from him. But let's move on then to the proper sort of stuff that we want to talk about within this podcast, the Liverpool angle. Gorsty, obviously, as you mentioned, back in action this week. Obviously, you were over there in Dubai for the training camp. What do you think they will have been working on? In fact, I know you spoke to Andy Robertson about exactly that. What will change when Liverpool come back from this break compared to what they were like before?
Yeah, I think one of the key themes of the best part of the fortnight that they were in Dubai for was working on more the tactical and technical elements rather than being a fitness-based mid-season programme. We know when they go to Evian or Saalfelden in Austria, it's very much fitness-based, double sessions, hard running, the lactate tests and all that kind of stuff. But this was a lot more about video analysis, tactical details that they were looking to work on, in particular from the front to work on the press. We've seen that within 40 seconds, didn't we, against Lyon in the first friendly. Liverpool win the ball high up the pitch, and before you know it, the 1-0 up through Fabio Carvalho. That sort of stuff is very much what they've been working on. So Klopp would have been absolutely delighted to have seen that. And he said as much actually after the game in the press conference. He said, he saw quite a lot of things that they had been working on, and that really pleased them. From the kind of 60-minute mark in that friendly, the team became a lot more of a youth team, and they started to lose the shape and whatever else, and Lyon were able to come back into the game and eventually win it. But for the first 45 minutes in particular with the senior players, there would have been a lot for Jurgen Klopp to be encouraged by, and that was taken into the entire game against AC Milan, I guess. Liverpool score again from kind of having numbers in and around that penalty area. Joel Matip striding forward to break up the lines. Firmino involved. Salah scores. And then it really became the Darwin Núñez show from about 65 minutes onwards, when he came back to training on Monday, linked up with the team in Dubai after flying in from Doha and the short break with his family. And he was so positive and direct. He had a really strong run down the left wing early on and nearly laid in Salah. Took his first goal superbly after a great ball from Bobby Clark, and then taps in at the end from Ben Doak to grab a second of the game. So I think there were a lot of things for Liverpool to be working on, and a lot of issues that they kind of need to iron out. And, I think it would have been a really kind of beneficial couple of weeks for them in Dubai, because, as I say, it wasn't something where they were just working on fitness. It was very much, detail oriented. And that's something that they don't always get the chance to do, don't they? We know that with the schedule that they have, it's very much press conference, game, day off, press conference, game, day off. And that is very much the cycle, particularly when you end up playing 63 games in one season. So, looks like they've used the time wisely, but the proof will be in the pudding over the next coming weeks and months.
Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it, Lynch? We thought that would have been the case in the summer. Obviously, didn't quite work out that way, but there is, I think, reasonable amounts of hope that Liverpool can put a few bits that they got wrong in the first half of the season right in the second. What is it that you're especially looking forward to, not just against Manchester City? Obviously, we don't quite know what that game's going to look like, but over the sort of next few months, what do you think is going to change for Liverpool?
Well, if we see the sort of restoration of that high press and that aggressive front-footed football, I think that'll make a big difference. I think, that's something that, is a big talking point for the first part of the season, is sort of the team looking slightly lethargic, not being, whether it was a tactical decision to sit off slightly more and try and conserve energy because of the way the season was laid out. I'm not sure, but it didn't work, and Liverpool were too easily got at, too easily played through. So you want to see that sort of principle being restored, and and I think that would certainly improve results and performances. And so, I think that's sort of something to look forward to, whether they've made those tweaks and just to see generally what else they've been working on, because there were other tactical tweaks we saw at the start of the season with Mo Salah's position. As much as Jurgen Klopp wants to deny that actually took place, that was definitely a thing they were trying at the start of the season. I'm sure they will have come up with something else slightly different in this time, and they've had a lot of time to think and a lot of time in the training ground, as Gorst says, that they don't usually get to work on these things. So hopefully see a slightly different Liverpool and a slightly different in a better way, because we need that. I think that I thought there were improvements toward leading up to the break, certainly, and reasons for hope, but you were thinking they needed to just get to this reset and really change things. Then I think there's still the blow, and we spoke about it so many times, of what's going on the left hand side with Luis Diaz out again and Diogo Jota still out. That's one of the big things they're going to still have to cope with. But hopefully there's been enough time to work on that, and they know who's going to be there and who's going to play that position in the short term, and then hopefully you can get Jota back fairly quickly and really sort of build up some momentum going into the latter half of the season, because Liverpool need it. They're not in a very good position at the moment in the Premier League, and they need to sort of hit the ground running from this restart and just ride that wave really till the end of the season.
I think it'd be really interesting to see, obviously, collectively what they come up with, Gorsty, but there's a few individuals as well that I think will really benefit from a rest. Mohamed Salah is one of them that we should mention as well, is the winner of the Fans Footballer of the Year. We can talk a little bit about that, but he in particular is one of those players that I just think, give him a few weeks off, let him rest, recuperate. He doesn't often get many chances to have games off, but he's had a good few weeks now. It feels like he could be one that really benefits from this.
Yeah, you hope so, don't you? Salah doesn't miss a game for Liverpool. He's never injured, is he? The only games he tends to miss are the early rounds of the domestic cup games, and it's no different at Egypt, really, is it? We went the Africa Cup of Nations and played virtually every single minute. I think he got brought off in stoppage time of one game, and they went all the way to the final and played. Had to get there via penalties in every single round. So he played a remarkable amount of minutes, actually, when he went to Cameroon in February. I think it was 750 minutes between kind of the second week of January through to the first week of February, which was a remarkable contribution from his part. And then he has to come back to Liverpool and kind of lead the charge for the second half of the season as well. And if you remember that Leicester game, when he started on the bench, but he was just so desperate to basically come on and put the disappointment of losing the final on penalties behind them. He actually played 20-25 minutes in that game, and it's just been an extraordinary output for him, really. So I think probably more than anyone, he will have benefited from this break, and he was just kind of finding form, wasn't he, just before the break, particularly that game against Tottenham when he got the brace. I think he's up to 14 goals for the season now, and when you think probably hasn't flew out of the traps as you would have hoped or would have liked, that's still a really impressive return. So, you think of all the players you might have benefited from this break, he'd certainly be, in the top three, I'd imagine. And if he kind of does come back at full pelt, then Liverpool's chances of finishing in that top four are going to be massively improved. And he's going to be the main man to do it, isn't he? We know Darwin Núñez was hitting a bit of form himself, but then you've got the news of Luis Diaz. He's on the shelf alongside Diogo Jota. So, it's going to be a lot of pressure on those two in particular, I think, to kind of fire Liverpool back into the top four mix. But, there are worse players to be relying on than Mohamed Salah when you need results and you need goals, I suppose.
Just to come in on one of the players sort of I'm looking forward to seeing and seeing how they react now is Fabinho, to be honest. I think, he had a really poor start to the season, sort of started to get there a little bit, but he's spent much of the first part of the season really being shouted at by Jurgen Klopp from the sidelines. He was getting it down the banks every week, not playing, not looking himself, not looking like he had the energy to get there. And I suppose we'll really see now whether the World Cup was a factor for him, whether he was thinking, I just want to protect myself to go away with Brazil and make sure I get there. I don't want to pick up injuries, because he has been prone in the past, hasn't he, to picking up little muscle injuries, little hamstring problems, things like that. So, if he was protecting himself a little bit, you just hope over the second half of this season he can, really show his best. Because Liverpool need him to as well. As much as there's talk about signing midfielders, I'm not particularly optimistic that will happen in January. I think that's still something for the summer. And if so, Liverpool are going to be reliant on the current crop. Maybe you get Artemello back and he makes a contribution. Yes, Naby Keita's fit again and he can play a big role. But if Liverpool are going to hit the heights that they have in previous seasons, they desperately need Fabinho to rediscover his form. And he's been miles off it this season. And let's just hope that that little break. And I know we went to World Cup and probably a disappointing end, but he can come back with sort of a renewed vigour and really show his best form again, because Liverpool need him to.
Yeah, there's a good few players in that sort of position that you think would benefit from this break and be able to kick on. And just to touch on the fans' footballer of the year thing again, Gorsty, obviously Salah, the Liverpool winner from that perspective. I suppose it is in part because a few of the other key players haven't maybe stepped up. Is Salah the worthy winner for you? Do you think was that the right result, and is that going to continue to be the case into 2023?
Well, I think once it goes to a public vote, you're almost nailed on that Mohamed Salah is going to be the winner, isn't it? He's the absolute doyen of Egypt, isn't he, with the 90-odd million population and the rest of the Middle East, really. I was speaking to a couple of people out in Dubai and they were just saying how kind of a hero he is for the entire region. So no surprise, really, to see him winning that. But was he a worthy winner? I'm not sure, really. A lot of people were pointing towards Alisson Becker's claims. And I thought he's had a sensational calendar year. Thiago Alcantara was good. But I wouldn't really suggest as being an absolute outstanding candidate for this calendar year. It's a bit of a strange one because there was a 2-week break in January and then the Africa Cup of Nations. So you can only really start that from kind of mid-February, and then Liverpool haven't played since November the 12th. And obviously you've got the end of the end of one season, the beginning of another season in the middle of that as well. So that's 2 months, is it 2.5 months? So there's not loads of football to kind of choose your winner from, really. And it's been Liverpool at different parts. The Liverpool who struggled at the start of this season and Liverpool who were absolutely flying at the back end of last season. So I don't think there's been that many outstanding candidates, really. But ultimately, when it does go to a public vote, Mohamed Salah will win. And it's not as if he's been terrible, is it, by any stretch of the imagination? I think he scored 24 goals in 2022 across all competitions. So, it's still a really, really strong return. Most strikers would bite your hand off for that. So I wouldn't say he's been the overwhelming and absolute nailed-on winner, but I can't grumble too much at the fact that he has won it, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. I think it's one of those, like you say, when it goes to a public vote, kind of inevitable. And like we said before, Lynch, I mean, with Salah, obviously the injuries in attack, Liverpool are going to be heavily reliant on him. Roberto Firmino as well is going to have to step up again. He's already played a lot of football. There's going to be a lot of pressure on those two players. But again, two players that I would say would probably benefit Firmino, particularly given the amount of football he's played this season, by just having a few weeks off and being able to reset.
That's it. If you're going to have to ride these players, then the best way to do it is off the back of a sort of unprecedented break and rest that they've had. So, they'll know they've got a big job ahead of them now in these coming sort of weeks. And Luis Diaz not being there and Diogo Jota not being there is just such a pain, really. So, you're going to rely on these players. I think the one thing you'd be encouraged by, particularly when it comes to Salah, is that they did towards the back end of that first part of the season really start getting him in goal scoring positions again, and that's absolutely vital to do that. It's also helpful for both of those players as well that Darwin Núñez is now back end of that period again. He started to really look like the player Liverpool thought they were getting, and picked up where he left off in the friendly. So immediately sort of put the World Cup behind him. So he can sort of help lighten the load. I'm just going to be interested to see what that whole, how he lays out that front three now in terms of does he now, because of that injury again, does he stick with Darwin Núñez down the left-hand side, or does he, because he's been experimenting with it, is it going to be Oxlade-Chamberlain or Fabio Carvalho coming to do a job, or just a mix of three and sort of see see how it works out from game to game. It's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But those couple of players there are going to be absolutely vital for Liverpool's hopes, because that attacking depth just isn't quite there at the moment because of the injuries, and they're going to have to pick up the slack. And one thing I would say is that it sort of helps that Firmino, before the break, was in sort of the goal scoring form of his life, maybe not playing the best he's ever played, but if you've got goals in the team, then maybe that's hugely helpful in terms of getting you over the line, even in games where you're maybe not playing your best.
Yeah, I think that the rest is going to be important, that opportunity to reset. But I think they also have to do a bit of business in January as well, Gorsty. We've all sort of agreed on that and needing new blood to come into this squad. But how likely do you think that is in January?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I think they've got to speculate to accumulate, essentially, because Liverpool don't get in the top four this season. It's going to set them back years, because we know Liverpool, particularly with the way that FSG run the club, with them being self-sufficient and all of that, they can't really afford to not have the Champions League money. And let's face it, they look more of a glamorous prospect for any external investors or outright buyers if they're a club within the Champions League as well, don't they? So there is that. So they've tended to cut the cloth accordingly, and they've been a little bit risk averse in some Januaries. You think about 2 years ago when they were absolutely crying out for the centre back, like you wouldn't believe, and they still only brought in Ozanka back late on loan, and Ben Davies, who couldn't pick him out of a lineup, if I'm being honest. So at times they've been too cautious, but I think looking at this one now, with January, and they're looking up at the table, I think maybe now's the time to be a little bit more bold, to take a little gamble here or there, because if they don't and it doesn't quite come off for them, then looking at next season and they're not in the Champions League, and that just sets them back, of their ultimate aim of eventually challenging Man City again for the Premier League title, doesn't it? So I think this is a massive month for Liverpool coming up, actually, in terms of off the field, and also as well, it's going to be Julian Ward's last transfer window as sporting director, and someone who's been at the club for over a decade. Everyone knows inside the club how talented he is. So to kind of tie one hand behind his back would be a crying shame for Liverpool, and if they don't do any business in the summer. And what he has done is to be his kind of legacy as sporting director. I think it'd be a little bit of a shame, really, particularly with Ian Graham going the same way as well. So maybe January could be the time where we see a little bit of a caution to the wind from the ownership, and the purse strings are loosened a bit. But I'm a bit like Lynchy. I'm not hugely optimistic on that front.
The thing is, as well, I just think, we saw last season, when you give Jurgen Klopp the tools that are almost similar to Pep Guardiola in terms of depth, if you give him those tools, look what he can achieve. I can't understand this, going into this season with clear weaknesses in the squad. What the thinking was behind that it's just madness. That there is the money there. I also don't buy the idea that Liverpool is skinned. It's just not simply true. We can look at the accounts; they're publicly available. Liverpool have the capability to spend big in certain positions, and needed to, and just didn't do it. And okay, you're not going to solve all your problems in the January window. It's difficult. For example, don't expect Jude Bellingham to move in this window, and we know he is Liverpool's number one target for midfield. Okay, totally understand that. But you can do some things. There are deals to be made there. I saw the story yesterday on Sky Sports about Moises Caicedo. I thought the wording of that was very interesting in terms of, it was very much couched from a Brighton side of things in terms of, there's interest and we don't want to let him go, but, it would have to be a big bid if we were to let him go. It's almost, the hint is out there that Caicedo could probably be got in January if a club was interested in sumping up the money. And I think a lot of clubs could be convinced in that way if the money's there. So I just think, even if it's not to save this season, I think Liverpool need to start building towards next season, and those clear weaknesses in the squad. They do need a forward going into next season, particularly Firmino's going to leave. They definitely need 2, if not 3 central midfielders. If you're not going into the market this time to save this season, then at least do it to start the rebuilding process that's going to need to be done next summer, because it's going to be, there's a lot of business needs to be done next summer as far as I'm concerned, and you're probably better to get ahead of that now. And Liverpool can afford to do it. The capability to do it is there. Whether they make the sporting choice not to do it is up to them. But I would strongly disagree if that's the route that they go down.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, you look at Luis Diaz, obviously the impact he had in the second half of last season was important, but it also, like you say, meant that he could start the start of this season knowing exactly where he needed to be and all the right positions and all the rest of it. It kind of gives him a bit of a running start for the start of the season to come as well. But it'd certainly be interesting. I mean, Moises Caicedo, Gorst, is one that has been linked. I mean, there's loads of names out there for Liverpool, but it is just kind of finding the right price. I suspect, given how much money Brighton get for players, it's probably not the easiest club to get a player out of.
Yeah, there is that, and there's also the kind of the nuts and bolts and the data and the specifics of what Liverpool midfielders need to be able to produce in terms of their numbers and whatever else that makes them suitable candidates for Liverpool's midfield. We can all sit there and watch football as fans, as laymen, if you like, and we think, he looks a good player. He's had a good World Cup. I like the look of him the last few months. But ultimately, these are the guys on the inside who have paid the money to choose the right people for the club, and it's an almost flawless recruitment history, isn't it? Over the last 5 years, you can't really think of many who you think Liverpool have signed, and you think, well, that one hasn't quite worked out. The only one I can really think of is maybe Naby Keita, but then you look at what Liverpool have won since he's come to the club, and he has made decent contributions to those trophies and whatever else. So. What we think looks good as a midfielder might not necessarily be right for Liverpool, so it's a difficult one, and I do think midfield in particular is more difficult to judge, because if you're an attacker and you can kind of pull something out of the bag and it looks outstanding, then everyone knows what that looks like as football watchers and fans and followers. Whereas if you see a dominant, commanding centre back, again, that's quite easy to spot, isn't it, as someone who watches football. But midfield, there's a lot more nuance and subtlety to it at times, and I think that is why some midfielders aren't necessarily on Liverpool's radar, who you're looking at it thinking, well, why aren't they? Because he looks like a player. There will be reasons for it and against it and whatever else, and that's ultimately why they are a kind of revered recruitment department, because of these decisions that they've more often than not got right over the last, well, certainly 5 years, I'd say.
Yeah, still about 2 weeks, isn't it, until the January transfer window opens. So still a bit of time for Liverpool to work on any possible plans. Of course, we'll keep you updated if there are any updates, and fingers crossed they can get one or two. And I think it would be really, really useful. But a couple of matches before that, obviously Manchester City, Lynchy on Thursday. I know that Guardiola has already been talking about only having 4 or 5 players available for that game. It is, to be fair to him, going to be quite a strange one to see how it looks like, not just in terms of kind of which players are playing and which ones aren't, but also what condition these players are in. I mean, among the 4 or 5 will be Erling Haaland and Kevin De Bruyne, I would imagine. So it's not the worst Manchester City team in the world, but it is going to be a weird game, I would say, on Thursday. All the midweek games are going to be a bit strange.
Yeah, I feel for Guardiola a little bit. I do just hope for him that he can cobble a team together somehow, some way. The conditions he has to work under are despicable, really. But yeah, I think it's going to have a little bit of a vibe of the Community Shield earlier this season, really. I think in terms of it's going to be a bit chaotic because of different players at different times in terms of where they're up to with the fitness, and some of them coming back from World Cups, some of them not quite there. So you're using young players, and it's going to be a really sort of mixed match. A couple of teams we see, so I think it could be a bit of a chaotic game, and that could really make it exciting. I think we've got a sort of fairly good idea what Liverpool's team's going to look like and how strong that could be. So your hope is that because Manchester City had so many players involved at the World Cup, that sort of weakens them quite a bit more than it does Liverpool, and Liverpool can come out on top. But like I say, I do think it's going to be a bit of an end-to-end and a bit of a mad game, just because of the nature of where people are up to in terms of fitness and that gap and trying to find the rhythm again. So it's going to be an interesting one, and it just feels crazy that I'm going to be sat there in the freezing cold at the Etihad 4 days after the World Cup's finished watching a Carabao Cup game. It's a mad one, but yeah, it's something to look forward to as well. And I think the Liverpool as well, there's not loads riding on it. I know it would be nice to defend the League Cup, but I think the priorities this season are go as deep as you can in the Champions League and just definitely get a top 4 place. So it's almost a little bit of a free hit for both sides, isn't it? And for Liverpool, especially with it being away from home. So it's one to look forward to, really.
Yeah, it's just good to have it back, isn't it? I mean, Newcastle and Leicester, they're in action tomorrow. That's only 2 days after a World Cup final, so at least Liverpool have got a little bit of extra time, Gorsty. But what are you expecting from the game? Is it one that you're looking forward to for being a Liverpool-Man City game, or will it not really feel like a Liverpool-Man City?
I don't know, really, and I suppose the team news will reveal all that. I actually think it's a really big opportunity for Liverpool because, like you say, Leicester and Newcastle have drawn each other as well. But excuse me, they're both in action, aren't they? But look at who's already out of it. You know, City knocked Chelsea out, didn't they? Tottenham are already out. Arsenal are already out. So if Liverpool can see off City at the Etihad, it kind of opens the field up a bit, doesn't it? And it's okay. It's not the kind of number one priority, but once you kind of get into the stage of the competition, you think, well, why not? Let's go for it. Particularly if, as I say, if you do see off a team like City, who have generally got the squad. I mean, I think they've won. Did they win 4 in a row before Liverpool won it last year? They have kind of dominated this competition in recent years. So I think it'd be a good tune-up for the seniors as well, the ones who are going to be involved at Villa on Boxing Day. I don't really buy the idea that you're still wrapping them in cotton wool for that game. So I think we will see a relatively strong Liverpool side. No idea what the City team's going to look like, in all honesty. I haven't really followed them too closely. But imagine Haaland will be playing, given he hasn't gone the World Cup and he'll need a little bit of a tune-up himself. So, yeah, it could be one of those kind of frantic, chaotic, dare it even be said, fun games at the Etihad on Thursday. But I do think if Liverpool can get by City, then it does open the field up a little bit. And then you're looking at, well, why can't we go for it? I mean, I don't think Liverpool have got the squad that they had last season that enabled them to go on and do that. But why not go for it? If you do manage to get through at the Etihad.
Yeah, certainly be interesting to see which teams each manager goes for, and we'll pick our teams now just to finish off. Gorsty, I'll come back to you. I think we expect within Kelleher will be in goal, but what about the back four? Could be similar to what we've seen in the friendlies, do you reckon?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not too sure if Calvin Ramsey's okay, but I think Milner will start. Should be Robertson at left back. Could easily be Tsimikas, couldn't it? But at centre half, I don't think Nat Phillips will get in ahead of Gomez, and Matip hasn't played too many minutes. I think he had a really good, solid 65 minutes against Milan on Sunday. Played the first half against Lyon, so this will just be another step forward in his comeback, and I think he'll play alongside Gomez.
Yeah, is that the same for you, Lynchy? Milner, Matip, Gomez, Robertson? You're on mute there, mate.
I'll unmute myself. Oh, it's a classic Zoom error. I think he's clearly, to start both friendlies with that back four, suggests that he's eyeing up that playing at the Etihad, and yeah, I'd be very surprised if there were any changes to that, to be honest.
Yes, I'm going for the exact same one. I'll stick with you, Lynchy, for the midfield. I think the midfield is interesting. Obviously, Stefan Bajcetic, we've seen it in the friendlies. He was one who was picked to start in both, I think, wasn't he? And really did look impressive. Be a big shout to put him in at the Etihad, but it is a possibility. Yeah,
and I think it feeds into that idea that that even Klopp maybe sees this as a little bit of a free hit as well, and not having Fabinho back, it's just a good opportunity for Bajcetic. And I think he's been so impressive whenever he's come in, not just in these friendlies, but I think he's had bits and pieces of sort of first team action in the first half of the season, and looked really, really good. So composed, gets about, real quality on the ball. So really good opportunities for him to play with a team that's not quite the first full strength team, but not miles away from it. And so I expect that midfield to sort of be similar, really. That Bajcetic, Thiago, Alcantara, and Elliott maybe will start this one, and on paper a really sort of exciting, well balanced midfield, I think.
Yeah, I think that's the three that I would go for, Gorsty. Obviously, Naby Keita is an option. I think Jordan Henderson's done a couple of training sessions. Whether he would start, I don't know. Possibly could be involved. But which three are you going to go with?
Yeah, just to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit, I'll go with Keita back in the midfield. He obviously hasn't played any competitive minutes since the Champions League final, I think, which is incredible, really. Obviously played a little bit of a cameo in the Community Shield, and then that was the last we've seen of him until these friendlies in Dubai. So, he's coming into the last few months of his contract. He can actually speak to clubs, can't he, in a couple of weeks outside of England about a pre-contract agreement. So if he's got any kind of long-term hopes of staying at Liverpool, then he's going to have to start doing a bit and doing it sooner rather than later. So I'll go with him in midfield alongside Pacetic and Thiago.
Interesting, right? I'll stick with you for the front three. I suppose Salah, Firmino, and Nunez. Is that probably the one that you go for, or possibly Fabio Carvalho?
I think I'd go with Oxlade-Chamberlain over Carvalho, if I'm honest. But the options are stretched, aren't they, at the moment? Liverpool have only got 3 recognised senior specialist forwards, if you like, and I don't know whether I'd just temper maybe starting or resting one of them. I think Salah will start. I think Firmino might. So I'll go with Oxlade-Chamberlain on the left and Nunez to come on even when he's needed.
Interesting. Lynchy, which way are you going with the forward line?
Yeah, I'd written down Salah, Firmino and Oxlade-Chamberlain. I think, with Nunez, maybe want a bit more time to get him sort of up to speed before he sort of throws him in. But it's kind of interesting, actually, because it will give us some sort of a hint, won't it, in terms of how he sees that left-sided issue, whether he does just throw Nunez back in there and sees him as an option there until either Jota or Diaz is back. It's interesting. But I think if he's got the choice there of Oxlade-Chamberlain or Carvalho, I think Oxlade-Chamberlain's experience and the fact that he has scored goals for Liverpool's, over a longer period of time, and actually filled in quite handily last season in the period during AFCON and scored a couple of goals and was important then. Maybe that will just get him the nod if he doesn't want to play Nunez there, and then eventually brings Nunez back in a central position. So yeah, I've gone for Salah, Firmino, and Oxlade-Chamberlain.
It's interesting. I think I'll go for Fabio Carvalho, but he's another one. Oxlade-Chamberlain in the Cater bracket of not long left on his contract and bit of work to do really to earn either a new one. Probably more likely a move elsewhere, but we'll see what happens. We'll quickly go around and do match predictions. I appreciate this is incredibly difficult to predict. We don't quite know what the teams are going to look like for either one, but Gorsty, Liverpool to win, or how do you reckon it might go?
Penalties, why not? Liverpool have got a great record on penalties, haven't they, of late, so might end up going all the way to penalties, and then why not pick Liverpool?
Yeah. Why not? Lynchy, Liverpool as well?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a bit chaotic, like I said. So maybe there's going to be goals in it and 3-2 Liverpool. Haaland, obviously, to score twice.
Yes, definitely. I'm sure he'll be keen to get on the score sheet. The same with Mohamed Salah as well, to be fair. Both of them, I'm sure, absolutely chomping at the bit, ready to come back to action, as we all are as well, to see Liverpool back in action. We'll leave it there for today's show, though. We'll be back on Friday with the next Blood Red podcast. Plenty more content before then elsewhere around the channel as well. Obviously, an exciting period of the season ahead for Liverpool. Will certainly be an interesting few weeks from all of us here, though. It's goodbye for now.